Well, it's great to be here. I mean, I've only been here since last evening and interacted with some of you. You're a really friendly crowd, I have to say. And friendly with each other, friendly with strangers. It's been a great welcome. I know that it seems like you're all on the same page on a lot of things, and it wouldn't be all that useful to preach to the choir about what we're supposed to be accomplishing. I think the displays I saw out there, the work you guys are doing, I think it is pretty clear that we have a common end in mind. I thought, gosh, it's scary to say this. I'm coming up on my 40th year, 36, 37 years in planning, and I thought I would kind of talk about the things that I've found to be really effective in doing planning, and it's a number of things. I think that it is a regional approach is important, but also contacting with humanity and connecting with people. I think fundamentally that's the really important part, is to understand what people want and how planning relates to them. I've been in planning, as I just said, a while, and I have never experienced the kind of prominence and hope that's put in the planning process. And it's not just professional planners, all kinds of people moving to see it that way. And I think it puts a lot of responsibility on us that are active in the field to actually do things that are meaningful. So let me go through some of my favorite ideas and maybe show some examples of how those things have been implemented. So the first thing is vision. And actually, my clients in Chicago hate that word because it sounds so mushy. And they're, you know, Chicago's a city with big shoulders. They don't want any mushy words. But frankly, vision is really important. It's this thing that binds us together. You know, my name's Fregonese. My mom was from Louisiana. You better bet I was raised Catholic. And the word vision, when people first started talking about it, made me a little uncomfortable. I mean, I'd read the lives of the saints. And when visions happens to the saints, it was usually a voice telling you to do something dangerous, possibly fatal. So that's not the kind of vision I mean. It's not an ethereal vision. It's really the kind of thing that Martin Luther King did on his famous speech, I Have a Dream. He talked about the future in such concrete ways. Even though it was an indefinite future, he created this world of equity where little children would play together and we would all be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. It was so precise that all these people believed that. And when you have people working together to believe that common vision, that's one of the keys to really motivating people. So I think fundamental to any great plan is finding a common vision. To do that, you have to really listen to people because it's not your vision imposed on them. You have to discover it in the population. A really good example of that is Chicago and the whole effort that came about the Chicago World's Fair. Chicago was a very dirty, disgusting, crime-ridden, city. It had burned to the ground just a few years before the World's Fair and was rebuilding in the same way. A lot of people wanted to show Chicago there was a different future. And in doing that, they built the White City, the World's Fair. The World's Fair was kind of this utopian urban form. And it showed people, and 25% of Americans went to that World's Fair. It showed people a world where things were orderly, they were beautiful, there was not the squalor and odors and smells. There was a city where you had prosperity and industry coming together and giving people really a great vision. And of course, that led to the City Beautiful movement. I bet there's places all over New Jersey that some of your more beautiful spots came following the World's Fair, where people were inspired to create cities that were beautiful and wonderful places to live. Of course, it inspired the plan of Chicago in 1909 being adopted, and Chicago still does this. In fact, I was at the club, the commercial club of Chicago yesterday morning. The people that paid for Daniel Burnham to do the plan of Chicago, that have been implementing it ever since, they still go back to that vision. That vision is still real. They celebrated the 100th anniversary a few years ago, and it was a big deal. They had concerts, they had thousands and hundreds of thousands of people involved. That's the kind of thing, if you capture that vision, it can last a really long time. There's another vision that captured our hearts, and that's the vision of the auto-oriented city. And I think it's one that has dominated us for a long time. This was the 1939 World's Fair, the GM exhibit, and it shows the city of the future, and you can see these roads. There's no congestion. There's no on-ramps or off-ramps either. But, you know, you could travel anywhere without any trouble at all. And I think the evolving, it was a view that really became commonly believed and held, and we built much of America, much of the infrastructure that we are all dealing with came out of that vision of a utopian world built on the automobile. In fact, I have a great little clip I'm going to play for you from the Magic Highway USA, which was on Disney's TV program in 1958, and just listen to the vision of the future that they are.
The shape of our cities will change as expanded highway transportation decentralizes our population centers into vast urban areas. With the advent of wider, faster expressways, the commuter's radius will be extended many miles. America will someday be crisscrossed by a network of super-speed transcontinental motorways. Tomorrow's living in spacious, well-planned communities will be closely integrated with the highway system. In the private motorport, the family car is automatically washed, dried, and refueled. As father chooses the route in advance on a push-button selector, electronics take over complete control. Progress can be accurately checked on a synchronized scanning map. With no driving responsibility, the family relaxes together. En route, business conferences are conducted by television. On entering the city, the family separates. Father to his office, mother and son to the shopping center. These new forms of vehicles will bring about special purpose roadways. Office buildings will combine unique parking and elevator services. From his private parking space, father will probably have to walk to his desk.
You know, it's really interesting how they hit it with, they got Skype, they got GPS, nav systems, but the other thing is the whole point of this was so you would never ever have to move again. You might as well be a brain on a plate. You need no body. And it was interesting how much we've done that, where for many, many years, generations, the assumption was no one would ever walk again, if at all possible. And we built places that are completely uninhabitable except for with a car. So that Magic Highway is kind of one of our big deals. If you're going to redevelop, that's one of the big obstacles. You've got Magic Highway all over New Jersey, all over Oregon, and something that we've got to deal with. In fact, just the object of walking has become a big deal, to the point where we have divorced exercise from our daily activity so much that you have to walk on machines. And it's funny to see how much people have divorced activity from exercise, to where you kind of have to wonder, these guys are going to go work on the Stairmaster. What are they doing? Anyway, that we have an epidemic that's related of mortality that's related to diet and activity. And that's something that I was coming from Chicago, working with public health officials there. That activity part of it is huge, and they're looking actually for prescriptions for activity, for being in nature, that you would, instead of getting Prozac and drugs, that maybe what we all need is just activity. There's clinical evidence that living in places that you're naturally active makes a huge difference to your health. So the emerging American vision, what I hear over and over and over again, is transforming these cities, not just restoring our historic places, but transforming the suburbs to places that are walkable again, to places that have activity, to places that are human scale, places that are built for us as people, not for our Magic Highway. And I think that vision is so predominant, it's really something. It's one that if you're going to meet your goal of redeveloping New Jersey, You know, capturing that, letting people figure out how to do that in their own places is one of the key missions you're going to have in the future. So to capture the vision, you must communicate. And communicate's a conversation, not a lecture. So I think I love New Urbanists. I have a lot of friends that are New Urbanists, and I go to their church sometimes. But, you know, you can't, it's a technique, it's not the end result. I believe visions come from culture. And as a planner, you have to be a cultural chameleon. You have to understand what it's like to look at things from that culture. Even if you're born and raised in New Jersey your whole life, if you're from Hoboken, you go to Trenton, it's a different culture, you know. Camden, it's a different culture. You have to let those places express their culture through planning. It's one of the strongest expressions of culture you'll ever see. Part of this is really to understand not everyone goes to a meeting. You've got 1% or less that will go to a physical meeting. But it's possible to engage tens of thousands of people if you allow them to participate from home through the internet, if you make sure you're on the press and following and sensitive to making stories about things that the press will cover. That's a really important part. I'll show you, we've done some examples. We just finished a regional plan in San Diego. 30,000 people were involved. And they were involved because not only did they have things on the internet, they had an iPad army going out with iPads, going to targeted audiences, helping them fill out the surveys and get involved. So I think with the effort, you can really get a lot of people involved. The second thing is you need to talk about things that people care about. You know, I bet if you go down to Trenton and talk about redevelopment to the person on the street, they go, what are you talking about? You know, what is this? And we use jargon, we use topics. We tend to talk about tactics and processes rather than outcomes. People care about safety, they care about education, they care about jobs. You need to formulate your stuff around that. You need to talk to them about that because that also will really make planning successful. When you're doing this, you need to create an identity and brand. So this is cute. I wish I'd have thought of this name. Planet Tulsa. It was the Tulsa Comprehensive Plan. Everybody's they still talk about Planet Tulsa. We had one, I'll show you in a minute, Region 2040. It was a really bad name. People thought it was a tax form, but, or that you were slightly nearsighted, but it stuck. And so I think that brand really is important. Today you need a web presence because people need to look at that, and a web presence means putting stuff on that's interesting, and that means putting stuff on that's visual. YouTube videos, pictures, because, you know, people are looking at it on a cell phone. They've got to be able to see that. And invite people to do activities that make a difference. Help them make critical decisions. We do lots of workshops and stuff. It's a lot of fun. We use these clickers. We got some of these instant voters. People love that because you see what everyone else is doing.
Why I'm
for all these doctors and nurses and all these people.
This is a light rail that will go from this point down toward downtown.
And I think the important part of that, you can see people of all ages, of all cultures. It's really hard sometimes to get younger people involved. It's hard to get certain minority groups involved, poor people. And I think if you work really hard, you can get all those people involved. We've had, our goals are 30% under 30. And we can usually hit that because, you know, basically young people love to socialize. You got to create social environments for them to come in, and it's their future. The other thing is, I think, is to allow people to talk about their future in their own words. And we've started using a lot of video to do that. So not only do they talk to their friends about this in their own words in those workshops, but they go through the internet and talk to people in their own words. We did this 2040 project in the 90s. This is my big hit. I was a small town planner, went to 2040. We did this. This is like, you know, a small town girl for Valley. I don't know. It was like the thing that brought me to national prominence, started my firm off it. But, you know, it was an interesting thing in that this is back in the day where we're communicating with people. We had videos in Blockbuster. We mailed things. It's so ancient. But basically, we got 20,000 people directly involved in that process. It ended up in a 20-year growth concept that was adopted in 1995, almost 20 years old, still completely valid. It's used every day. It's been used ever since. There's been a tremendous amount, light rail lines built, open spaces preserved, and centers developed. When you look at the 2040 map, you can see that the region, the Portland region, you can't see any city boundaries. You can't see any jurisdictional boundaries. You see the urban form in its whole. And if you look at this little place, that's Beaverton. Beaverton has some of the best transit service in the country, but it was built around it was a suburban place, and this is a place where the mayor and the council have recently gotten their citizens to really transform Beaverton. It's the Beaverton Civic Plan that they started with the vision, with thousands of people involved, and moved into it. And one thing that they all wanted was a real downtown and something that would spur redevelopment. So rather than me telling them, I'd like you to see the video. This is a little clip of a 10-minute video where the people in Beaverton talked about their own town and what their aspirations were. And they say things I could never say. I'd be run out of town. But if you put a high school student in there saying the same thing, it's much more effective.
Where do you think downtown Beaverton is?
There is no downtown Beaverton at this point.
It's kind of difficult to tell where Beaverton's downtown is.
Is this going to be downtown? Is this town center?
That's $1 million question.
Nobody really knows where is downtown Beaverton.
My name is John Gottschall, and I teach photography here at the Arts and Communication Magnet, and I teach another class called Urban Design. When I asked the kids to design a street that they would be interested in designing, what they came up with was, interesting public places where they can listen to music, perhaps, where they can just even walk around and have it be a stimulating environment. There's no place to do that downtown Beaverton. Now, walking around downtown Beaverton is the last thing that they want to do. In fact, if you ask them, would they walk around, they look at you like, why would I do that?
Hey, after school, you guys want to go to Bed Bath & Beyond and hang out?
Beaverton feels really concrete and pavement and not very friendly.
It is so expansive. It's like a concrete jungle.
If we change the lane sizes, put some streetscape in there, make the left turn safer, poke through a couple more cross streets.
If we can turn it from a 5-lane high-speed car arterial to a boulevard, a parkway, something that has that strong pedestrian element along with the movement of the vehicles, that maybe even to some extent slows the traffic down a bit, still getting throughput but not necessarily at the same speed, then we start to get the intermixing of pedestrians and vehicles to a degree we don't have right now.
And I love that regional accent those girls had. That is so Northwest, you know. And it's really, you know, it was really spoken that way. Another thing which I think, this maybe will strike home, Louisiana speaks. Louisiana has almost no planning history or no planning tradition. In fact, if you sit down with somebody from Louisiana and talk about the future and some troubles coming and things that they might want to be doing, you know, they'll kind of look around and say, let's make some gumbo and go dancing. They really, it's a culture that lives for today, and I'm half Louisianan, so I can do that. My mother's family's from there. We went down after Katrina. We were invited down to really do a regional plan because the one thing they were afraid of, that they were going to build it back just like it was before. This was going to happen again, and they needed to be safe. They needed to be secure. They needed to make sure that they were going to build back in a sustainable way. So they might not have used those exact words, but that was their goal. They funded a program called Louisiana Speaks, and we went across the South, across the southern parishes, 26 parishes, talking about what the future that they wanted. Really doing a vision poll online that got 25,000 people involved, putting together the leaders from the state into thinking through where they were going to go in the future, and put together Louisiana Speaks, our vision. That has been actually, and it's amazing what's happened. Almost all the parishes you see have done plans. There's an extensive restoration of the wetlands going on that was just talk and no action. And it's been funded, frankly, in a large part by the federal government saying we're here to help, Louisiana saying if you want to help us plan. It's not been a huge part of the money, but a certain percentage of it is going to bringing people together to building sustainable. And Sean Donovan, I heard him here this morning, that organization has been extremely helpful, along with FEMA, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. All these organizations have come together to help that. One of the projects that we worked on was to work with the coast, a place that is going through extreme sea level rise and subsidence, where they are losing 30 square miles of land a year to the ocean. To help people that live in that coast, that have been there for hundreds of years, who are tied to the land, plan for the future. That way of life is precious. So how do you get a vision for that? I think, again, it's letting people talk, and this is very much a different region, a different culture. This is their discussion about how to deal with the future.
The river knows it sets me free. The blue sky, she brings me in, she gives me wings, yeah.
My dad bought this place before I was born. I was born here, and I'm going to die here.
This is home. They lived this land full, and 3 generations of family have been on the same property forever, so it makes people want to come back.
She brings me in, she gives.
Slowly and slowly we'll have less land, so we'll all have to move. And you know, when you're born and raised on the bayou and you're used to living off the land, and the bayou's at your back door, so to speak, it's hard for people to grasp that eventually they will have to leave because we don't have any more land.
Before they put the levees, they built the levees in the lower river, our state was actually changing in that it was accreting land. It was growing. Louisiana was growing to almost 1 square mile a year. And then when they put the levees in, you had this immediate flip to where you've had over the last 8 years an average of about 28 square miles of land loss per year. And there were some decades in there where we lost 34, 35 square miles a year. And then in the last 5 years, we've lost an average of almost 70 or 80 square miles of land per year.
The system is changing much, much quicker than it ever has, because we're at that critical point.
So, again, that's something that if it's not coming from the local culture, spoken in the local way, that's a message that's really hard to hear. But it's something they are working on. I've worked on 6 plan. I'm on my 6th plan. And you'll notice this is the Lafourche Parish Comprehensive Resiliency Plan. That was that parish right there on the coast. They're going to lose half the parish over the plan period. And yet they're dealing with it. They're building for sustainability in a way that's appropriate to them. So what is desired today? What do people really want out of planning? You know, in my view, redevelopment is where it's at, and people really want to see their existing area transformed. It's not about building new communities that are that look like Disney World. It's about rebuilding places that they know, and that's most of the work that I've done has been that. This is Portland. That was the downtown. Of course, rebuilding neighborhoods, recycling buildings, taking an old rail yard, turning into the Pearl District in Portland. These are all examples. But frankly, taking a place like this, which is an abandoned building in Dallas, and finding ways to convert that into something really useful, not necessarily, you know, that adaptive reuse. If you look at places that are revitalized, adaptive reuse of existing structures is probably 60, 70, 80% of the growth that you get. People are expecting innovative transport. You know, I think people are expecting more than just the traditional heavy rail and bus system. We've done a bunch of stuff in Portland that's happening all over the country. Streetcars, we built a tram, certainly BRT, looking at bus rapid transit, and using bikes more, and you know, those kinds of things. Portland, it's amazing, has got a 500% increase in bike ridership by spending 0.7 of 1% of our transportation budget on bikes, 0.7 of 1%. That bridge that I showed has more bikes and pedestrians and transit riders than people in cars. It's about 60% non-auto. Walkability is one of people are expecting innovative transport. You know, I think people are expecting more than just the traditional heavy rail and bus system. We've done a bunch of stuff in Portland that's happening all over the country. Streetcars, we built a tram, certainly BRT, looking at bus rapid transit, and using bikes more, and you know, those kinds of things. Portland, it's amazing, has got a 500% increase in bike ridership by spending 0.7 of 1% of our transportation budget on bikes, 0.7 of 1%. That bridge that I showed has more bikes and pedestrians and transit riders than people in cars. It's about 60% non-auto. Walkability is one of the things that is a constant and that I hear people talk about all the time. If you have a vision, I'd be surprised if walkability doesn't come into it. This is actually the National Association of Realtors survey, and this is something that wasn't even on the radar screen, but we asked people, when you decide to live, how important would it be for you to have each of the following within an easy walk? So very important or somewhat important: a grocery store, 75%, pharmacy, 65%, hospital, restaurants, cultural amenities. You go down the list, it wasn't even on the radar screen 10 years ago. Now, 3 out of 4 people want to be able to walk to a grocery store. And I think the market is seeing that and understanding that walkability is a big part of it. You all see Walk Score. I mean, in my neighborhood, people that when they rent or sell a house, the Walk Score is posted because that's a big selling point. Complete Streets, then, taking these streets, and this is a national movement of being able to convert streets into a more walkable place and sharing the right-of-way with a whole bunch of different users, making the world a lot more livable. Another thing that I see as a really big part is nature in the city. You know, the traditional view is there's no room for nature in the city. We've got the city and we've got nature. The nature's outside the city, and the city is the city. But actually, there's a lot of work now on bringing nature into the city. This is an old quarry, that island in front. It's been protected because it's a blue heron rookery. Because there's blue heron there, there's bald eagles there, because they eat blue herons, among other things. And so now, in our city, in the downtown, you can see bald eagles. You know, never, I don't think in the history of Portland that was true. You can see blue herons everywhere. They come in my backyard and fish in my 3-foot pond to get my goldfish. I gave up on koi. They just were, if I'm going to, you know, goldfish are 10 for $1. That's about right. The bats in Austin that come and roost on the Congress Street Bridge just started doing that in the early 80s. Now it's a huge attraction. So that nature in the city is a big part of it. And this is actually, you know, there's maybe not some not so good things about it, in that the coyotes in Portland feel so comfortable they'll take a ride on transit. I thought that was interesting. But part of this has to be connecting people with nature. You can't be so urban that you forget about people's need to be in contact with nature and humanity. And then finally, implementation. This is something that we really fail at. Capturing a vision, getting people excited, not being able to implement it is kind of cruel. And actually, you are destroying something for the future, because when you come back in and that's happened, they've gotten excited about a vision of population, and then nothing's happened, they become very skeptical and they tend not to participate. So I think it's important to do that. And frankly, planners and people in the smart growth community need to understand markets. The market is your friend. It didn't always be, but now it is. It is really your friend. And you have to understand how to harness the free market system to deliver the kind of future that people want. The old way was we would do colored maps and zone it. I mean, this is when I started out. You do a colored map and you do regulations about what you couldn't do or what you had to do when you did it. We assumed people were going to have an incentive to do it, because we had the only game in town. No one was redeveloping, and if you wanted to develop, you were going to buy Farmer Jones' land, and we were going to bring it into the city, and we'd zone it, and you'd have to build it according to the plan. And that's no longer true. And you really have to understand how to incentivize redevelopment, or it's not going to happen. We have put together a set of tools that we used internally for a long time. Envision Tomorrow. There's a prototype builder that builds buildings, and then it goes into a scenario builder. And we actually talked about this last night. We're going to do a webinar. It's free, open source, and public domain. We gave this to the public in 2009 because we entered into partnerships with universities to really build that. What you get is you don't start with a colored pencil. You start with buildings. You start with how much it costs to build them, what you can get for rent, and what you can pay for the land. And you put together these buildings into a system where those go into development types like town centers, main streets, subdivisions, and then you paint it on a map and you get indicators. So as you're going and you're developing your plan, you can see how you're doing. You can understand what's happening. And then you get results in real time. You get, as an example, this is East 15th in Tulsa. You can do your colored map, but you also understand which ones are going to be able to be developed under what conditions. So you'll understand if not much happens, it's not your colored map that's the problem, it's your market approach and your business plan. So good plans need a business plan. You need to understand what the developers have to go through. And I think, frankly, there's a real cooperative spirit that you can work with. We've been developing this with Reed Ewing, Dr. Chris Nelson, and Bob Patterson at UT Austin. I'm hoping Rutgers and others will get involved and start participating in this. It's a tremendous list of apps. Basically, this is a way for these researchers, theoretical researchers, to put their research on the ground for you to use. So it's like theoretical physicists working with engineers to make things feasible. You get things like fiscal impact. You can find out what your revenues and costs are going to be and what your net balance is. Workforce housing, where and what kind of workforce housing would you need? How much are people going to be walking or biking without going through the regional model? Redevelopment candidates, building energy consumption, balanced housing, where you can see how close to market demand is your plan going to deliver, and where are you out of balance? Where can you recycle that? So I think I'd like to close and just show you a little bit of a project in Dallas we did that kind of brought that together. This is basically, these are poor neighborhoods in Dallas that have had light rail, either recently or for a while, that have not experienced redevelopment. We were charged to develop a plan for each one of these. And actually, in one of these, you can see these people there, you can tell they're really bored. This is a place that they told me when we went there, if plans would fix a neighborhood, this would be Shangri-La. Because we had 4 or 5 plans. Ain't nothing ever happened. Ain't nothing going to happen. This is all a bunch of baloney. Why should I come to this again? So, you know, we have to have a very pragmatic approach. This was designed not just to do the plan, but to do projects too. So there was going to be something tangible out of it. And one of the things that we were told by our advisors is there's 4 festivals here. Get your stuff out of the workshop and go to the festivals. So this is in one of the neighborhoods, largely African American, the Harambee Festival. We went and bought a tent and we raffled off a TV. If you would come in and fill out a survey, you would be able to participate. And so in this area where we had this whole community, right in the middle of the culture, we got people talking about the future, and it's very different than a workshop, but it really worked. It was something that was tremendous to be there, and it was actually a lot of fun. I love these kids. See, I can't even move that cool. I've tried my whole life. Now you'll see in a minute our booth. You got a raffle for a $100 TV, a raffle ticket, and the people explaining this to you were people from the neighborhood who had been working with us, talking to their neighbors about what the future would be. You know, what came out of that was station area plans and colored maps, but in each one of those, we picked 2 projects that we actually went and pretended to develop. We had to pretend to buy them, we had to design it, and we had to finance it. And actually, in one of these, it's kind of interesting, the city of Dallas owned the property, 4 acres. They were going to build a simple library with about 1,000 parking spaces. But they didn't have money. It was going to be 10 years before they did it. What we did is that we worked with this to make the library being built for free, 230 housing units that were leased, basically a medical clinic, a couple of retail, so that they get a library for free and this beautiful development. This is actually going out on the market for an RFP in a month or 2. So out of this project comes real things. That's the way to capture a vision. And I think finally I'm going to leave you with a thought. A vision without action is hallucination. And I think that's really important that as you go forward you do that. That's our website, frego.com. You can get some of the materials on there, and I want to thank you very much for inviting me here. This has been great and very inspiring for me.